For this lesson, you're going to need one 2 bezel, one round faceted gemstone that will fit that 2 bezel, and whatever piece it's going to be. I'm going to be making a ring. I'm not going to show you how to make the ring because by now, hopefully you already know how to make a ring and attach a bezel to it. If you don't, you can watch one of my earlier videos on how to do that. I'll also be providing a couple of tips at the end of this video on how I like to attach my 2 bezels to my rings. But first, let's make sure the inside of our bezel is clean so we get all of our polish and grime out of there so it doesn't impact on the brilliance of our stone. Next, you need to clamp down your ring somehow. I like to use a piece of leather here and my ball vise. A couple of things is you want to make sure that you are supporting underneath the edge of the bezel because we're going to be putting a fair amount of downward force on the edge, so we don't want to make our ring shank cave in. So there's a variety of different tools I like to use for this. Each one has its purpose, but the one I'm going to be using today is this bezel pusher. And as you can see, I have filed in a recessed surface here. And this is really nice because as I'm pushing against the bezel here, it is less likely to slip off this direction or this direction. And I've polished it so it will create a nice rounded edge on this as I go around. So our first step, of course, is going to be to put the stone in. Hopefully by now you've already checked to make sure your stone fits the bezel, which you should have done when you were first picking out your bezel and your stone. Now, setting a 2 bezel is not that much different than setting a normal bezel. You're going to start on one side and then go to the opposite side and then do the 2 perpendicular sides. Think of it as setting a set of prongs, except instead of just being 4 prongs, there's an infinite number of prongs. So I'm going to simply start here and slowly work this back and forth. Now you can see I've already got that part starting to flatten out right here. Don't try to push it all the way over on the first pass. Just go a little bit. Now I'm going to go ahead and switch to the opposite side. I like to position my finger and my thumb here, and that way if my hand slips, I will hit my hand, and I can even pinch the end of the bezel rocker and use these 2 fingers on my left hand or my non-dominant hand to push the bezel rocker back and forth as I'm rocking the handle back and forth. You can see here it starts to go over. Now I'm going to go over here to this side, do the same thing. And as I do this, I'm slowly increasing the angle that I'm pushing on until I'm reaching almost dead vertical. Depending on the thickness of the wall of the bezel, you may not have to have that much pressure. Once I've got it all the way around on the 4 different sides, you'll see the stone is tight. And that's because this would be just like a prong setting, 4 different points of contact, the stone is set. So next, all we're going to do is we're just going to go around the bezel, and I'm going to position the back here at the point where I've already rolled the bezel over, and slowly just roll the bezel rocker around here. I'm using the groove here on the inside of my bezel rocker to help align this. And this keeps me from marring the stone, slipping, marring the metal, and so forth. So we're just going to go around. And just take it slowly, go around as many times as you need to in order to get the bezel so that it is lying down flush against the pavilion. I'm sorry, not the pavilion, the crown, which is the top part of your stone. And doing this, getting that edge down I mean, if I run my finger across it, I shouldn't feel it catching against my skin at all. Because if it does, then over time what's going to happen is dirt and grime is going to fill in underneath that edge, and that's going to really impact the brilliance of your stone. It's really difficult to get cleaned out. Now, I'm using a cubic zirconia. These are really durable. If you're setting something fragile, like an emerald, then my policy generally is to go quickly, and as soon as the bezel is over the top and it is tight, I stop, because you don't want to over tighten on a brittle stone like emerald or aquamarine. You just run a higher risk of breaking your stone. So let's take a quick look here. I put a satin finish on this because I wanted to show you the difference between where the metal has been touched by the burnisher and where it hasn't. You can see here my burnisher, because it's polished, puts a nice polished edge around there. To finish this, I would simply clean this up with a polishing wheel, which I'll do now. So on this polishing wheel here, I have pre-cut a step in the polishing wheel, much like the burnisher I was using. That way I can safely just polish the rim here without touching the stone, and also without affecting the satin polish I have on my bezel. And by polishing it this direction, if I were to polish it this way, the polishing compound could get pulled under the edge of the bezel. If I polish it this way, I'm more likely to slip and ruin my satin finish. So by putting this edge here, let me show you. There it is. By putting that edge there, that allows me to match that contour perfectly and move the stone across the polishing wheel, and I don't end up with polishing compound stuck under the bezel or anything on there. So once you're happy with the finish, you can just give it another quick blast at the steamer and you're all done.